welcome to the Decisive Connection, and I'm your host, Brett Dicey. Please subscribe to the Decisive Connection on all your favorite podcasting apps. Leave a 5-star review. It really does help with the rankings, and let us know how we're doing. But this week, I have Dr. Chris Walters with me, and he is an anesthesiologist in the private practice for 20 years. He's been an inventor of several different concepts brought to market through partnerships with medical device companies. And we're just happy to have him on the show. We're going to be talking about the Cobra Coil this week. So welcome to the show, Dr. Walters.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And the first question I ask all my guests is, are you a coffee or tea drinker?
Coffee.
Do you have any specific, do you like medium, dark, light?
I prefer the dark roast. I just tried to make some coffee, but my coffee machine just broke. So I'm going caffeine free right now.
Oof. I don't know if I could actually do that, but you're a brave person for that one.
Oh, yeah. We're going to see how it goes.
Yeah. So I gave a brief introduction to you, but can you summarize your expertise to our audience?
Sure. Yes. I practice anesthesia. I work in about a half hour south of Boston, and my practice is private. It's a general practice, so I cover most of all types or most surgeries that are performed, with the exception of open heart surgery. So I do a lot of orthopedic, general surgery, vascular, interventional procedures, out of the operating room procedures all around the hospital, but just a lot of your full spectrum surgeries. So it keeps me busy, and it's growing every day, the amount of patients that we're seeing. So it's exciting.
All right. And so what type of cases do you participate in for anesthesiology, and how does Cobra Coil work in with that as well?
Yeah, so at our particular hospital, we're very heavy in the orthopedics. We cover total joints, shoulders, knees, hips, traumatic ortho as well, fractures. I also do general anesthesiology for general surgery. I'm sorry, for open abdominal cases, gallbladders, appendixes, small bowel resections, large bowel resections, all that. And we do vascular aneurysm repairs. We do carotid surgeries, neurosurgeries, pediatrics, basic pediatrics. We do podiatry, plastic surgery, and then we do a whole host of out of the operating room anesthesia as well for interventional anesthetic cases. So the Cobra Coil, Codan came to me with help on this, and I was really excited about it because the main issue with anesthesia is our big nemesis is we call it IV spaghetti. And that's basically, you can picture various IV tubings getting all tangled up when you're doing a case, especially when you're transferring them from the bed to the operating room and back. It's like looking behind your TV set and seeing a ball of cables, if you can understand, trying to undo them. That happens in anesthesia, and it becomes not only frustrating but unsafe. And the Cobra Coil concept, when I saw it, it really looked like aha moment for IV tubing.
I understand that. Well, even from a computer standpoint, you have too many USBs plugged in the back of your computer. It looks like a spider has actually made their own web through your cables. So, I mean, as an inventor yourself, does this just help with that, with the IV management instead of cable management, I would usually say, but IV management of just keeping it all neat and knowing oh, this cable goes here, this cable goes, or this IV tubing goes here, this IV tubing goes here.
What it does is it really it takes away the clutter by having that coil shape. It's basically spiraling in on itself and compact. And the genius part of it is that as you if you need a longer part of the IV, all you do is just separate the coils from each other, and they nicely lengthen. It's almost like if you think about you have a retractable dog leash, and you don't want all that length, you can shorten it. And what this does is it reduces the opportunity for for loose IVs tubing to get hung up on each other, because they're all kind of just as long as they have to be. And if you need them to be longer, you can stretch them out to be longer, and then they kind of recoil back a little bit as well. So it's basically making the tubing what you need, instead of having uh, these long tubings that not only get tangled, but they can drop on the floor. They can get contaminated. So what it does is it keeps all the tubings kind of at their minimum length, basically keeping them nice and separate from each other, and they just don't tend to find each other. It's amazing. I'll turn my back and look back at the patient, and just it's like, how did they all get tangled up? But with this option, they're hanging from the IV poles, and they're all basically where they need to be, the length they need to be, without the excess. And the excess is what gets you tangled up, really.
So could this also reduce like any kinks that may actually happen? So I'm pretty sure like extra length could actually like bend or like fold, I guess, the IV tubing accidentally. I mean, you don't want that as well. So could this help reduce any of that type of malfunction that may incur because you have too much length in the IV tubing?
It can. I've found, like, I've had situations where I'm trying to inject medication, and it's not going. And it's like, what the heck? There's no, why isn't this injecting? Did the IV come out or what? And I found that I looked down the line of the IV tubing, and exactly that. It's kinked on itself, or being pinched or compressed by something on the operating room bed, or your foot even. So what this does is, you're right. It takes that ability for it to fold on itself as well. So that's definitely a bonus with this as well. You're not going to get these weird angles and opportunities to get stuck on itself.
And so, I mean, this does help with safety then, since you know you don't get tangled up and you're like, where does this IV tubing go? Okay, it's here. So you know exactly where it's at. Plus, it keeps it all, I guess, nice, short, and neat, or optimal length, I guess is the best way of saying it. Nice optimal length. So does that help with the safety as well? Because you know where it's going. Hopefully, you should know where it's going, because it will help with just keeping it all neat and organized. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, definitely. So, like, an example would be if you have an IV in one arm and an IV in the other arm, and they're getting kind of wrapped in each other, and you need to inject something rapidly, but you might have the right arm is your arm that you have this medication going through, in your left arm this medication, and it takes you a minute to find out, okay, where is this port going, is it going into the right arm, the left arm, what's going through this arm? And this will kind of help separate that, keep it from getting wrapped up upon itself. But one of the big things is, when we're transferring patients who are critically ill from the ICU into the operating room, they have always multiple lines going. It's like a spaghetti. It's like you're in a spaghetti festival here. So that's not only troublesome to us as far as a time consuming thing, but it's also an opportunity to have lines get pulled out by accidentally getting stuck on things during the transfer from their bed to the operating room table. So one of the riskiest times is transferring a patient from the bed that they're coming from, let's say the ICU, to the operating room table for the surgery. You have things coming out of the neck, as far as IVs going in the neck, you have them going in the groin, you have them going in the arms. And your main goal as an anesthesiologist is to make sure, when you're transferring this patient with all their monitors over, you don't pull something out, or by having the wrong tension on it. So this really will keep things, I think, kind of excess length will be gone. It'll reduce that risk of getting tangled, and also the longer it takes to untangle them, get them situated in an operating room, could delay surgery. It could be a life-saving surgery that we're coming back from, and you're sitting there and they're ready to go, and you're like saying, "Hold on, I need to detangle this stuff and get it, on my IV poles." And their pressure could be crashing. They could be in trouble. And what you don't want is to sit there and, okay, this one goes here, this one goes here. Let's unwrap this, and then that also gets tangled up with invasive monitoring. So we have cables as well as IVs for their vital sign monitoring. So it's a mess if you're dealing with all these cables and IV tubings, and you want to do it in the quickest manner as you can to get the patient asleep. And next thing you know, you're wasting time. So this will be great because I think it'll keep everything up and high off the ground. You can transfer it more easily. And if you do pull on the coil, instead of pulling it out of the patient's neck, it'll probably just unravel the coil a little bit. So it also acts as a buffer um, to your inadvertent pulling. So it just has so many things all wrapped in one, no pun intended.
I don't know. When you talk about the putting in the groin and pulling stuff out, I was like, ooh, that sounds like it would hurt a lot, quite a bit, if it pulled out. So I'm glad the Cobra Coil's there just for the groin you said about,
Oh,
because I can't get that out of my head now.
yeah, we had just a couple months ago. We had a case that we're trying to take back to the ICU after a long case, and they had probably like 5 or 6 drips going, all very important things. And one of them got stuck on the wheel of the gurney, and actually did get pulled out. And that's because it was dragging low on the ground and no one saw it. So if we can keep everything off the ground, away from the wheels, away from everything, that's another bonus.
Yeah, I can imagine that would just help, because I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody that's doing 100 different things doesn't really need to have an extra thing of where's the tubing? Is the
Yep.
tubing too long? Is the tubing too short? Like, I feel like that just helps with having one less thing to worry about.
Yeah, and it does. It also, when those tubings fall on the floor, it is a contamination risk because those IV ports are then rubbing against the dirty floor. Keep everything kind of just where it needs to be, and it reduces that as well.
Gotcha. And can this help with the medication errors as well? But I mean, we talked about like contamination and everything, but does this just help, just knowing that this cable goes to this thing, does it help with that type of like error or reducing the errors?
I think it could, just as far as have knowing where the IVs are going and what drugs are going through them instead of accidentally, because a lot of times you'll have an infusion drug that has a blood pressure elevator going through it, and that line is strictly for infusion of a medication to increase your blood pressure. So you don't want to actually take and those have ports in them as well. You wouldn't want to take that line with the port and then bolus your medication that you're trying to give in that particular line, because then you're going to give them a bolus of that blood pressure medicine at the same time. You want to have a free line that is used for injection. So if they're all tangled up and you're in a rush and I've done it where you actually injecting in a infusion line instead of injecting in a line that was meant for injecting medications in. So in that regard, it kind of hits back to the organization under stressful situations. Whenever you're under a stressful situation, you don't want to be clamoring around looking for the right port. If they're kind of all organized, that's the key. It's very similar to being a pilot. You have all these monitors and everything. You want to know where everything is, and you want to have a routine. And this will help that.
Gotcha. I mean, reducing errors just probably helps with doctors in general, because it gets them to do the surgery and or get the medication in a lot quicker. So less errors means quicker surgeries, I guess, the best way of saying it.
Yeah, less errors mean better outcomes, and it just makes things a lot a lot less stressful.
And can you share with our audience what kind of cases this device could be used for? I mean, it's IV tubing, so it could be used. It could be used for like EMTs as well. If they're going to if they're going to the hospital, could this be used because of just all the IV tubing you said? Could it be helped with that as well? Plus, with outpatient stuff, could there be applications for the Cobra Coil using in different areas of the hospital?
Yeah, so it could be used definitely for the emergency personnel out there in the field. If you think about an ambulance or you think about a life flight helicopter, and they're giving all these resuscitative drugs as well, they're tight spaces, and so I don't think it's a great environment to have excessive tubing everywhere. And I think this would kind of really add to their efficiency as well in the field, because you got things more up and off the ground, up and more visible. And if you need that extra length, you have it. And if you don't, you're set. So I think that there would be a real plus out in the emergency field where things are happening fast in small places, but also outside the operating room in these off-site locations. Like I mentioned before, all the interventional locations and OB wings and all that, it would definitely be a help. I think anywhere IV infusions and medications are being delivered in the anesthesia world. it's going to help. So in the operating room, in these interventional suites, it's all about organization. It's all about cleanliness, reducing the risk of contamination, and easy access. So I think it's kind of a full spectrum use type of thing.
And these could be like transferred to the current system of surgery where you really wouldn't miss a beat too much, because instead of going, okay, how long is this tubing? You're like, okay, it's all coiled up. It can take off or put more tubing in if I need it.
Yeah, it's great. It would be a pretty seamless incorporation, I believe, because it's one of those obvious things when you see it. It's like, oh yeah, this is a no-brainer. This is a great idea. So I think you would incorporate it well. You can make it incorporated into anesthesia tubing. You can make it into pump tubing if you needed it. Um, with pump tubing, you probably want to have it on the distal side of the pump, so the one that's going to the patient. And in the anesthesia realm, you'd want it just more towards the bag where it's hanging up top and pull from there. But it'd be great because you could add to it. You could add extension sets to it. You could add the anesthesia manifold. You could add my new device to it. It would be well received.
So this could almost like replace all the standard tubing just because it is something that is retractable and everything. You can
Right. Yeah.
add more, you can take
Yeah,
off less.
definitely. I think it could be a game changer as far as just standard of care.
And then are there any like type of innovations that could help with this as well? You said your device, but with the Cobra Coil, could this help in every industry that uses tubing? Like you said, in general, could this be part of just like dialysis in some way or something like that? Do you see more of that type of like, or just strictly in the hospital and emergency services?
Yeah, those are kind of my field, so I can relate to those. In terms of dialysis centers, I'm not sure if because that's just kind of my wheelhouse a little bit, but um, definitely. I mean, that's a huge audience right there. Just emergency in the hospitals, but definitely in the outpatient surgical centers too. There's ambulatory surgical centers all over the country. They're putting them in malls and everywhere you go. So I think anywhere where there is medications being delivered, it would be great. So those outpatient surgical centers where they do patients where they go home the same day would receive this. Be well received as well.
Mm. And then where can people find you online?
You can, I'm pretty simple. I just have an email address at sirwalters@hotmail.com. And I'm on that all the time. So I'd love to hear from you. And met a lot of great people through my invention career so far. And everyone's very helpful. And just the sharing of knowledge and stuff has helped me along the way. So I'd love to hear from you guys.
And any final thoughts for listeners?
Well, I think that the technology is getting better. Codan's doing an amazing job. They're leading the field in this, and I think it's just going to get better as time goes on. And I'm excited to help out in any way I can to kind of move things in the in a more advanced direction. So it's been great.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Walters, for joining the Decisive Connection and sharing your knowledge and expertise on anesthesiology.
Oh, my pleasure, and I hope this was helpful.
And thank you for listening to The Decisive Connection. As always, please subscribe to The Decisive Connection on all your favorite podcasting apps. Leave a 5-star review. It really does help with the rankings. But join us next week as we talk to another great thought leader in the medical field. All right, guys, stay safe. Get to understanding where you could actually be more efficient with your IV tubing by getting the Cobra Coil. And see you next week. Later.